My name's Andrew Meredith. I'm the editor of Farmers Weekly, the leading trade publication for farmers across the UK. And I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon to chair this panel. The observant among you who came looking for Abby Kay will be sorely disappointed. Unfortunately, I'm stepping in for her. She couldn't be here today. But obviously, it's not about the chair, it's about the panel. So joining me here this afternoon to discuss the Environmental Land Management Scheme and answer two important questions. Where are we now and where are we going? Four fine panelists. I'll introduce them in a second, but the format of this afternoon's discussion will be some opening remarks from each of my guests here for about 5 minutes each, and then we will spend the remainder of the 55 minutes doing some Q&A, hopefully. So you've got lots of questions from a farmer perspective, from a taxpayer perspective, from an environmental perspective. We're going to try and tackle those questions from as many angles as possible. So joining me to do that this afternoon, on the end we have the Wildlife Trust Strategic Lead on Agriculture, Vicki Hers. We have, yes, applause. We have the RSPB England's Head of Sustainable Land Policy, Alice Groom. We have the Chair of Nature Friendly Farming Network UK, Martin Lines. And Cumbrian organic dairy farmer and Twitter celebrity, James Robinson. No, Instagram. Insta, Twitter, some of each. All right. Well, we'll proceed in order from me outwards. So, James, your opening remarks, please, on the Environmental Land Management Scheme. Where are we now and where are we going, do you think?
Thank you very much, Andrew. Twitter celebrity, I think he's just pushing the boundaries of celebrity just a bit far there, isn't it? So I suppose I'll give you background to what we do at home. So we're on a 300-acre dairy farm, all organic, been organic for 20 years, but we've used stewardship schemes since 1991. So we've been using schemes to help improve the farm and to help help the management of the farm, really, but then in turn it's also help the biodiversity, help the wildlife and all that as well. So schemes have really, really worked for us. So whenever there's a new scheme announced, I see whether it's going to fit with the way we farm. So we always try and fit it into the way we farm. We don't change any way of farming. The things that we're on at the moment, so we've got a higher tier across 240 acres. I'm going to be old school, I'm going to do acres. And then we have a mid-tier on 60 acres. But we also have the SFI 23, and then we also have some boundary capital grants as well within that as well. SFI 23 started in February, I think it was, something like that, for us, having applied for it the year before, of course. We had a previous SFI 22 before that, and then because of the way things have worked, there was a big hold up in between, so we lost about 6 months, I think, something like that, of payments, because we had to withdraw one scheme and then they weren't ready to start the other scheme. So that for me is one of the number one problem, really. Make sure the schemes are right before they get them out. But I understand why they do want to get them out there, is to get farmers engaged with it. But at the moment there's been too many mistakes, too many conflictions between the various schemes. We're organic as well, so we got conversion grants when we converted to organic, and that for us was one of the main, not one of the main reasons why I went organic, but it was a real buffer for us to be able to go organic. The main problem I see with a lot of the regenerative movement and people wanting to move towards that regenerative movement, there's a cash flow is a big problem. So the conversion grants for us when we went to organic was a real opportunity for us to put like a real solid base there. Just to give us a big sort of backstop, really, I suppose, for any of the yield losses and stuff that we would receive over the next few years. So I'd like to see that. We have school visits on farm as well, so we're using the visits very much. We're using the schemes very much to help us with school visits, getting people out on farms. But I'd like an opportunity to get other people on farms as well. It's not just school groups that need to learn. It's other farmers. It's communities. There's an opportunity for them to come out on farm as well. Once the infrastructure's there, set up for the school visits, get them out and use that. And also give them a bit of money, give schools money for transport as well to get them out to the actual farm. Because quite often, it's a free visit, but the transport to the farm is one of the main stumbling blocks for actually getting them out there. So those are my sort of key asks, I think, really. But in terms of the SFI generally, I think it's working well. but it's in its very, very early stages. But I think as farmers, we really have to go with that. We have to work with it, and we have to tell them where the problems are and then give them solutions for those problems as well. You know, I think the more people that engage, the better these schemes are going to be, and it's very much a two-way learning process between them all.
Fantastic. Thank you. Martin, your thoughts next.
Lovely, thank you. And I'll come at it from two different parts, really. One, as a stakeholder, sitting on many of the DEFRA stakeholder meetings for the last 6 years, many thousands of hours with all organisations are given sitting on those meetings to inform and reflect on their asks. And we see lots of good things that are starting to happen, and then politics moved it back, or they changed direction, or different things happened. And I find that really challenging. There was no real clear set out goal and journey to galvanise behind. There was a concept of health and harmony at the beginning for Michael Gove, but actually that following through has been chopping and changing, been watered down. So he's found it really challenging that they'll suddenly come out with a political moment and want to make an announcement, and some of the background hasn't always been done, or they've funded lots of tests and trials across the country for lots of the stuff they already knew, but why go and spend a load of money on new stuff, and what was the point of it? And as a stakeholder, we're not actually given the information about the results of some of that. So how are we actually knowing what they are hoping to achieve if we're not getting shared the results? As taxpayers, we're funded all that research, so why isn't that open source, and actually we can understand what is going on and what are the aims and objectives of the outcomes they're aiming for and the options they're offering. The concept was for 3 schemes, the higher level or the landscape recovery. We're seeing a number of pilots going on with those, lots of projects going out, but we're not yet seeing the private funding coming in. Lots of potential, but is that really going to deliver? We think it will. The mid-tier stuff that they keep chopping and changing the name on, and it's kind of a countryside stewardship now. That's kind of been de-invested in, and that higher HLS schemes of actually advice, proper long-term thinking about actions on farms is kind of been watered down. Lots of focus on SFI, simplification, flexibility, some easy money for really poor public value outcomes. But if, as a farmer, though, that's really added flexibility in what I can do. I can chop and change. The challenge has been, as a farmer, we have been in ELS, HLS. We had to come out of it because it wasn't the values in the ELS and HLS hadn't gone up, but the other options had. So I was actually financially disadvantaged staying in the scheme. When I left the scheme in the summer, we had no scheme, but we're delivering the outcomes till the 1st of January. Really just poor joined up approach, and that's what we've seen from the government, of just not joining it up. We now run 3, but manage another countryside stewardship starting the 1st of January. We're in SFI 23 on 3 schemes. We're about to do SFI 24, and we'll probably end up with 4 schemes, all with different starting dates, all with different outcomes, and some of the outcomes are the same. Outcome is the same, but it's got a different name. As a farmer, it's blooming complicated now, and trying to understand what fits in the right place, and the lack of a whole farm approach in joining it up. So I'm really supportive of the movement to public money for public goods. We've seen the basic payment disconnected now, so we receive the money for no action, and we'll tail that off for the next few years. But how do we build stability and security for farmers in the future when payments and timelines keep shifting? We really need a structured 5 and 10 year plan, so as businesses we can plan the outcomes society wants and to reward us from, and then where the private markets step in to add value.
Thank you. Alice.
Hi, everybody. RSPB, we work on nature-friendly farming, and some people say why. And we would always say because you can only save nature with farmers. Farmers are key to achieving that. 70% of the land is farmed, but we can't expect farmers to do that on their own, to nurture habitats, to manage their farm in a way that help species to recover, but we can't achieve it without them. So we need schemes. And so we're really, really supportive of this shift to public money for public goods. But of course, the schemes need to work. And we understand and know and have learned a lot about what does and doesn't work. And what we try and bring to the party is that evidence, working with farmers, trying to understand the scientific evidence. What do birds need? What do other wildlife need? But how do you integrate that onto a farm? And so it's critical that the schemes are designed in a way that works with the farmers that we've been working for all those years. And that's one of the challenges we've had with ELM. I mean, the journey that we've been on with environmental land management schemes is about 40 years. The RSPB has been working on it that whole journey. And one of the really keystone stories, which is really integrated in my personal story, is working with farmers in South Devon to recover cell buntings. And that has taught us so much about engaging farmers, getting those crucial resources that bird needs, but tailoring it so it works with those farms, making sure that there is the advice, infused advisors that don't just understand what the bird needs, but understand farming, but also those higher tier schemes. So it's great to have entry level schemes to encourage people in, but they need to be, the SFI is a bit blunt, it needs sharpening up as a tool, but we need those higher level stewardship schemes, those 10-year schemes where farmers can get the highest rewards, they can really nurture their farm, they can really integrate into their business decisions. And that little cell bunting that I mentioned, that's when I started learning about higher level stewardship, when a really enthusiastic RSPB advisor came and worked on my cousin's farm where I used to go and have all my holidays. And that got me really inspired by what farming can do, what the role of RSPB and enthusing people about nature and about trying to make sure that they have a profitable functioning business, but also that it's, nature friendly. And that amazing work over about 30 years recovered that species, and that was only achieved through those farmers, advisors that were passionate and engaged and understood the challenges that those farmers were facing. And then our advocacy people, including people like myself, but my predecessors, fighting to make sure that the schemes paid the right amount of money, that they paid on time, that they were designed well, that they had the right options, that those options were clear, farmers understood what it was that was expected of them as return for those contracts. And that is what we want to keep doing. The SFI isn't quite where it needs to be. We need to, where the hell is the higher tier gone? We need that, and we need to make sure that there's enough money and that this really works.
Thank you. And Vicki.
Hi, yes, I'm the Wildlife Trust. We've got loads of other things we know need to change. This is system change that we need to create the right environment for farmers and growers to do what they need to do, to be adapting to the rapidly changing climate. But we're here to talk about ELMs, so I'll only talk about ELMs. And one of the key things that we do want to see, on top of what everybody else has said, absolutely on higher tier, absolutely need to be ensuring that that's working. It's not working at the moment. So you can't convert your contract to the new schemes. You're massively losing out as farmers if you're in one of the old contracts. That is totally unfair because you're one of the farmers who's doing loads. So that's got to change. The critical, sorry, just making sure I don't forget anything. And the critical thing is also to provide for all farmers. All farmers need to be able to go on the transition towards nature-friendly, climate-adapted farming everywhere. So we're creating the corridors for nature, reducing the fragmentation of habitats, which provides the nature for us as society, but also for farmers, because we know a lot of that nature will support our farming systems as well, beneficial insects, etc. But what we do need for that to work, on top of what everybody else has said, is a significantly better independent advisory service. And we did get a proposal for this from the last government. It was called an offer, Sustainable Farming Advisory Offer. So we need to insist that we get that it's funded and it's available, accessible to all farmers and growers. We really need to make sure horticulture is part of this. The other thing I was going to say, we wanted to make the SFI clearly have an ambition going forward, so it's not staying static, that it's actually growing an ambition. So as farmers do things and they work or they don't work, and you solve those problems, they need to be able to grow in ambition going forward. So you're delivering for the taxpayer and for nature, but also thinking again about the whole farm approach. There was loads of work. With 6 years, Martin talked about. We talked for ages about land management plans. There was millions spent on tests and trials on land management plans as a sort of prerequisite, but also a real asset for farmers to look at all the natural capital, all the natural assets on their farm, all their crops, livestock, etc., to actually deliver a plan using SFI and all the other things to deliver a future resilient climate adapted farm. That whole farm plan, that land management plan, has disappeared, and I think we should be clamouring for it back. It was going to be a brilliant asset, really, really brilliant asset to help farmers. It didn't have to be too onerous in the first year or the first 5 years. Where's it gone? Loads of money spent on that. There was loads of money spent by the Wildlife Trust, actually. I mean, the Wildlife Trust is a federation of 46 organisations, and we had money to trial on the land that the Trust runs, the farmland, and it has a lot of land. And it's really unclear, as Martin's saying, whether those tests and trials have been applied. But that being said, I'm really thrilled that we've got the SFI, the CS, and landscape recovery. I think it's an incredible achievement from farmers, from conservation groups, despite incredible amount of times over the years where they've been threatened. We all know the times we had strange government moments where there was at risk of it disappearing, going back to old schemes which we know don't work. So I'm thrilled, but we need sort of whole farm approaches, land management plan, advisory service, and we need more money. I'm sure we'd all agree on that, a bigger budget, which we can talk about. But in short, I think that DEFRA has been listening, so I think we need to clamour when it doesn't work and keep clamouring and make fuss.
Thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. Before I throw the floor open, I just want to pick up on the point you made the case powerfully there for it being important for all farmers to be able to access this. But I do confess to having a shred of sympathy in understanding where DEFRA officials came from when in earlier iterations it was really targeted towards the arable sector, because the message coming from them, at least privately, was this is where they can get most bang for their buck in buying environmental improvements. James, I'm going to use you as an example, as you're sat next to me. You've got a fantastic farm that even if SFI didn't exist, you were already doing a huge amount for nature. Isn't it the case that really you should be getting limited or no funding, and we should be targeting it at those most nature depleted areas?
No. I think that all the narrative all the way through has been that they are rewarding people who are already doing it. So and people shouldn't be penalised for getting on board 10, 15, 20 years ago. But we also need they need a management payment, but then we also need the monies need to be good enough to encourage people to get to that stage. And I think a farm such as ours, so we've been lucky enough to get some good schemes over the time, but our scheme can be used as an example, not as anything perfect, don't get me wrong, but it's something that you're going to be able to see what it looks like in 10, 15 years time. So it can be a bit of a vision as to what hedges could look like maybe, or what a wetland area created could look like, or what managing water courses could look like. So there's a real opportunity there, and that's about getting farmers onto other farms again and learning from farming.
It has unlocked your ability to do more faster.
It has. I mean, we would probably do it anyways. And the organic conversion grant for us was the real sort of moment to really change the majority of our farm. But we've had whole farm things before, so we've done like whole hedgerow management things. We've used it really to improve the main infrastructure of the farm, improve the soils again with such as organic conversion stuff like that. And then the SFIs now, they're paying for stuff really that we're already doing. So things like the legume option, permanent pasture, herbal lays. Especially herbal lay payment, it's a fantastic payment. It's too high, I think, far too high, really, and that's encouraged a lot of people to potentially plough out areas of land that there might not be species-rich grassland, but they're definitely permanent pastures, and they've been ploughing them out to put herbal lays in because that it's far too high, I think, is that. So yeah, it's just been a bit skewed the wrong way. Some of the payments, the aims, I think, have been right, but just wrong sometimes.
Would anyone else like to comment on this tension between trying to spread it around so as many farmers and farming businesses have access to it versus the need to get value for a taxpayer in trying to put the money in the right places environmentally?
So I think you need a bit of both, and that's what I was saying about the SFI needing to sort of sharpen up. So I think every farmer should be able to access the schemes, but I think DEFRA have started from slightly the wrong place. Like the people doing the most should be at the front of the queue. So we should we know from evidence that if you target to those areas where you've got good or okay populations of birds, for example, you need to take less land out of production to get the species to recover nationally. So it's actually very good value for money to target the sort of really, really good and those people who are doing the most, and really reward those people who have invested in their farm businesses and are going in the right direction. But then you need to expand out. And so it's right that everyone should be able to engage in nature-friendly or sustainable actions, because if you look at some of those really big, ambitious targets around nature and climate, everyone's going to have to engage. And also the benefit of getting on that kind of journey is that it will help people be more resilient and to be able to adapt to the threat of climate change, but also to get all of those benefits that nature can provide to the farm business.
Okay.
I'd just say on the arable side, I think we've been over generously rewarded. For DEFRA to get money out the door, there's lots of actions arable farmers do. Whether that's companion cropping, cover cropping, direct drilling, habitats around it. They're easy actions and easy evidence to say money's out the door, stuff's happening. But actually what we really know is most arable farming, if we get a fair return for the commodity we're producing, we can make money. So how do we find the balance? If you're an upland farmer or a grassland farmer, you've been asked to deliver outcomes. Your productivity is in a different place. If you're dairy, that's a different thing. But if you're just a sheep or a beef farmer, where are we shifting? Why aren't we shifting some of the money from the lowland and the upland to up the hill to give them a real value to being what their public goods they can deliver? And I've certainly been the last few years really trying to champion sort of, it's great as an arable farmer being rewarded, but we've got to make this work across the country, because I actually want some of the sheep that are in the uplands to come in, or in the lower lands, to come over to graze my land. And I also want to produce stuff that they need. And we need to have a whole of the whole of England farming system really working. We've got to balance where the reward is and where the market and where the profitability is, or the lack of, and how society contributes income streams to help balance that out.
So it is still a farmer support payment then?
Pardon?
It is still a farmer support payment then?
No, I think we've moved away from farmer support. It's an action thing, but actually those actions underpin my farming business, building healthier, more resilient soils. Adding pollinators on my landscape, we have evidence giving us 18% net yield benefit. I don't use insecticides, I'm not organic. More beetles because of habitat. Those actions, I'm actually seeing those actions as society's paying me for some, that's great, but they're actually increasing my productivity and resilience in my business. So it is a public support for farming, but it's in a completely different way, that's looking for a different outcome. And that's, for me, long-term food security. If I'm a more resilient soil and system and business, that's food security in the future. Paying me because I'm a business, somebody else will take some of that off. Where I rent land, the landlord wanted the area-based payment because that was free money. So we're now able to drag those rents down and talk about the value of what we produce.
I think that's a really well-known point, the resilience side. That's how we sell it to the Treasury, isn't it, Vicki? Final words on this topic? Well,
it's interesting because I don't think climate and carbon was there at the beginning. Well, we were talking about ELMs, all those years ago. Now it's really dominant, and it should be. But we can do both. Well, three things: farmer livelihoods, food, and the climate and nature. Small things, climate and nature outcomes that those schemes plus other things will need to deliver. But what I was going to say was the issue of instability. One of the things we could have predicted that farmers would, we'd get the kind of things that James was talking about there, full-scale herbal lays where they probably aren't best placed. And then we get the 25% cutoff. Really they should be listening more to a range of, advisors, experts, farmers, to get an understanding of what's the likely income, reaction. If we give you this amount of money, will you do X? It's not rocket science, is it? Is it difficult? And so they've made these sort of churning, and it's really difficult for farmers to keep up. So I hope for the next period there is stability, but it gets it right.
Thank you. Now, questions. Because of my instructions from the sound technician, and not because I am a centrist, I'm going to focus on the middle for questions, because that is the range of the microphone. So if you're on the fringes and you have a burning question, can you just make your way to the walkways, please? But I saw some hands a second ago. Let's start with the gentleman on my left there. We'll get a microphone over to you so that the recording is nice and clear. So just state your name, please, and then tell us your question.
Hello, that works. Good. I'm Matt. I run the Local Nature Partnership in LMP in Oxfordshire, and I'm interested in prioritisation. Local actors in Oxfordshire have been spending a lot of time creating an LNRS, a local nature recovery strategy. We keep hearing whispers that that may be linked to ELM. As an LMP, we're doing a lot of work on nature market frameworks for private money, and we plan to link that to LNRS. So do we think, is there plans for ELM to be linked to LNRS?
Who was it mentioned? Private money and public money linking up. It was you, wasn't it, Martin? Is that the vehicle for it?
Yeah, that's part of the model. I'm thinking about how that and the local decisions. It was going to be core, but where's the advice? Where's that local convening and power? And they kind of chuck local governments a little bit of money to work out a local nature recovery strategy, but we're not, as farmers, plugged into it. How many farmers here have actually got involved with their local county local nature recovery strategy? You lot are going to be the ones that are going to need to deliver it. That's the challenge. How are we joining this up? And I think it's a key part. And that's part of what we're not hearing from government of what's the bigger picture? What do you actually want us to do? How is this jigsaw puzzle coming together? So as farmers and businesses, we can look at all those income streams and opportunities of in our place, in our farm, in our landscape, the priorities that need to be delivered. Maybe that's carbon sequestration, water management, biodiversity, bird species, food production. What is needed from me as a farmer in my place on my farm?
So that comes back to the farm advice.
We need more farm advice and local advice. Context of local context is critical about what farmers will need to see they need to deliver in the future.
Can I just say something though? The Devon Wildlife Trust has done a brilliant piece of work funded by DEFRA, looking at what level of governance you need and which stakeholders you need in the room at a local level to make the kind of decisions you're talking about and Martin's talking about, and LNRS is absolutely part of that. And that, I meant to have put up a blog on this and it will come up on the Wildlife Trust soon, but it's a really good piece of work. It's funded by you, it's taxpayers' work. Really good piece of work.
James, what do you say to those farmers that grumble sometimes that the people who've done best out of SFI so far are the farm advisors? Is that right, and does it matter?
I would hope that SFI farmers can do it themselves, because it's the simplest thing I've ever applied for. It took me a matter of minutes, pretty much. Obviously, you've got to make sure all your prescriptions are doable, and you're going to be able to do. But in terms of its, it was basically log in, double click your fields with your actions, and done. So I really hope advisors aren't telling farmers that it is something that they need. An advisor help to do, because the idea is it's simple, it's intuitive, and you can just get on and do it. And any advisors, please just give your farmers a chance to get on and do it.
Did you want to come in? You're leaning.
Well, I was just going to say on that, in the SFI, there are 3 or 4 plans that you can get paid to do. So you can get your a nutrient management plan, a IPM plan, a soil plan. There's plans. And you can get a lot of money for that. Most of that potentially goes to an advisor. But why? And then there's the management fee, which is quite a lot of public money. I worked out, you could be spending £60 million just on the management fee. Why not bundle that all into a single land management plan and have a nationally funded nature positive or sustainable farming advisory service? Much better value for money, and you'd make sure that everything adds up. So going back to the point about these sort of, is there that join up between local nature recovery strategies and ELM? Not at the moment. And the problem is it's pick and mix, complete free choice in the SFI, and a hope and a wish and a prayer that that's going to add up to meeting nature and climate targets. And it's not. There needs to be those conversations that join up, the link between those local conversations and then the schemes.
Perhaps the first thing a Labour government will renationalise is ADAS then. I saw, yes, let's have a hand down here. Fellow journalist, I believe.
Hi, it's Adam Vaughan here from The Times. Thanks, Sis. I just had 2 questions, which is, do you see any reasons to think a Labour government would be better for ELMs? They talk broadly about improving it, but that's about it, and unlike other parties not offering more money. And the second question was, do you think we've got the balance of money right so far in terms of ambition for nature? Conscious a lot of it has gone into the SFI, which is obviously the sort of least ambitious in terms of nature side of it. So have we got that right so far? And the future question. Thanks.
Vicki, you go first on that one.
they've got to get it right. They've got to be positive about it. I mean, having spoken to the Shadow Secretary of State and the ministers, I get the impression they really want it to work and it to work better along the lines of what we discussed. But, they're telling me what I want to hear. But I do get the impression that they do get it. And I don't certainly not think they're in the business of saying, oh, scrap it and start again. So I'm fairly positive about it. And in the past, they have been actually quite positive for farmers, if you actually look at the data and the money. Your second question was on whether the budget, yeah. I mean, last year, we, with RSPB and National Trust, brought out a detailed piece of analysis showing that we needed at least 4.4 billion. And I think the situation's changed now. And if we look at it now, and we are looking at it now, with all the changes in input costs and loads of changes in demands and needs, that it's going to be even higher. But 4.4 billion is, what we were saying last year. And it's absolutely essential we have the funds there to give the farmers the revenue they need to deliver the public goods that we absolutely know we need.
Just coming in on that, I mean, whatever government we have needs to invest in ELM, and they need to make sure it works. So, whatever, and whichever government we have, they also need to invest the right amount of money. Vicki's right in referring to that 4.4 figure. We think it's going to be higher, and we've got hopefully some figures that an economist is working on that will be coming out soon. But that shows, if you go back to our older piece of work that we published at Groundswell last year, that does show it gives you a good indication of how you need to spend the money, not just how much. And it does show if you spend too much money in the SFI, on cover crops and herbal lays, and not enough on the, nature-based solutions, restoring peatlands, that you won't hit those targets. And there's a risk that you've engaged so many farmers, all that goodwill, but you haven't hit those targets. And then it's much, much more tricky for us to go to Treasury and say, we need this money.
And I think the problem with the next government, and if it's a Labour government, is its value for money of what we're actually doing. Many of the management plans are actually helping us meet legal requirements of nutrient management plans. Now, this advice thing, is that real good value for money when it's law kind of we should be doing? We all have to do IPM plans for if you're a red tractor. So why should we get additional payment? So how do we value that to society? How does Labour value that to the Treasury? So I think that Labour had to be really challenged because they haven't seen the data. What are those schemes? It goes back to evidence. What are those actions they're paying farmers to do? Does it meet the Environmental Improvement Plan to halt nature's decline by 2030 and all the other aspirations, and keeping farming viable and producing food? And that's going to be the real challenge. So Labour can't talk about more money until they understand what the value is. And if we look at the targets they've got in 6 years' time to halt nature's decline, if I'm putting a habitat in, it's 3 years before it's properly delivering anything. And if they're going to take time in getting that value money out the door, they're going to have to invest significant amounts and also harness private markets in valuing and adding value, not paying for the same outcomes. So I think there's a huge challenge for the government, or for the DEFRA, or the shadow DEFRA, which may be Labour, coming in to talk to Treasury. But I think it's a huge opportunity for all of us as farmers to demonstrate the value of public money for public goods. What are we delivering society really wants? And for many of the options at the moment, they're not valued enough. The public access, the water quality and everything else, land to flood, to protect water, properties. We have to get better as farmers to communicate the value of public money so the Treasury steps up and society recognises why farmers should be rewarded for those actions.
But in 2 weeks' time, Rachel Reeves is going to take Steve Reed's piggy bank away, and some tough decisions are going to have to be made. As however many well-costed reports come through that say we need to spend more here, it's simply likely anyway that isn't going to be the case. So what then do you prioritise? First and second and third. And
also, the budget is only secured for this Parliament that's just finished. They've got budget written to 25 because they're committed already. We've got a huge case to argue about meeting legal requirements that the government are legally bound to for climate, for biodiversity, and farmers are going to need to help deliver that. So let's align our funding we needed to meet their targets, which also help resilience in farming systems and food production, and join it all together. Resilient farmed landscapes will produce food security, and then we can attach that to society and Treasury. It's a heck of an argument we've got to present in a clear and concise way.
Okay. Yes, let's have another question from the front row, please, and then I will go further back again afterwards.
Remind the people on the outside to come in.
That's right. Those of you further away, the range of the mic is limited, so make your way forward if you have a question, please, just a little bit. Yes, madam.
Tracy Worcester, Forbidden Fruit and Veg. I'm wondering how much money you're getting or being tempted to get to actually have an insect farm on your land or a vertical farm, or actually look at an alternative way of feeding people with lab-grown meat. Because I think, tell me if there's a hell of a lot of the money that we could use for farmers producing food, is it actually going into this novel, high-tech, drone, GM type of farming that is really, in many of our opinion, just junk food on steroids?
So are you asking whether the government should spend more or less on funding sort of an ag-tech revolution?
Less. So my question to you is, how much are they offering for you? Because I heard that the guy Fisher, who's got the most vertical farms in this country, says it just wouldn't work if it was not heavily subsidized. And I'm wondering if you're seeing precious subsidies going into this novel tech banking type of Bill Gates farming.
Does anyone want to come back on that? I've got a few things I could say.
Well, I think, we're not anti-tech, and innovation absolutely needs quite a lot of that, in fact, but it needs to be based on nature-friendly farming, based on soil which nurtures our health, as well as the health of the environment and the wildlife. So systems like that should get the bulk of money. It's a long time since I did an analysis of where the R&D spend is in DEFRA, I'm afraid. So I don't know, what the balance is, but certainly it should be towards those kind of agroecological soil-based systems. But, innovation has a role to play, and ideally we'd be funding some small and medium-scale innovation for farmers so they can access small-scale tech, not just huge machinery and huge, big, expensive approaches, which just puts them in more debt.
Martin.
I'll just say, this show demonstrates, and many of the farmers here, the power's in the hands of the farmers. Skill them up, give them the support, give them the knowledge. Tech can support that, but we've seen huge amounts of money going to ag tech solutions to sell me a product or a service or a license that I'm going to be into a new system. Instead of buying a can, it'd be a license fee for a genetic grown wheat or a robotic system. I want to put the power back into farmers. Let's change the system. And we've seen by many farmers already had been speaking here in our previous shows. Actually, changing the system and focusing on soil and the system actually cuts costs and needs less inputs, but makes you more resilient. Yes, tech can add, but it shouldn't be the centre of what we produce.
What's the most high-tech thing on your farm, James?
Oh, we're not that backward. Come on. I know it's Cumbria, but we have got electric and stuff. So for instance, on that, our neighbour used to graze the cows all the time, and then they switched to just grazing during the day, and then they keep them at night. They've now gone fully robotic, and that was because of a labour issue. So they've got 300 cows through 5 robots, I think there is. Now, those robots were funded through the tech grant stuff. So it's been a solution for their labour, and it's a solution for their efficiency. But then those cows now aren't in the fields, and those fields are now cut 4 times a year with slurry and nitrogen dressing in between as well. Monoculture of like a ryegrass. So we've lost the diversity from the grassland that you would get with cows grazing, but you've also lost all the invertebrates so that those cattle would have supported as well. So tech can have a massive detrimental effect with the environment as well, inadvertently, but very much so. Yeah,
it's those unseen knock-on consequences often, isn't it, that take a few years to be unpicked.
There's also, just to add, we waste an awful lot of food, and we're using it to put into cars and things like that. So we've got to look at the whole use of our cropping before we start saying we need to intensify production in the kind of ways which take.
Well made point. Right, I pledge to go further back. Let's have a hand on the end there, please. Right on the left, my left. See how far the mic can go. Yep.
Fabia Bramowski, Sustainable Food Trust and the Global Farm Metric. Can you hear?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So I kind of wanted to take one step back where we were talking about DEFRA and the funding and the landscape recovery plans, we did a DEFRA-funded project that was the beginnings of, I think, something really powerful. Global Farm Metric is all about holistic, resilient farm systems, considering the whole system, just as you were mentioning, Martin, about, we've got to value all the different parts of that system. But what we've learned is that in order to make this really powerful, we can't imagine that every single farmer will collect this data all the time. And we need to start to create these data stacks that look at different types of data that can then be built into much bigger picture landscape recovery and looking at how farms can come together so that they're investable in and that they can really make a difference. As individuals, we can make a small difference, but together, then all the kinds of different parts of our work join up. And I think that's where DEFRA need to start to put some real funding in. How do we bring money in local government, money to the farmer, money to all of the other players who are helping to finance this transition together, and how do we create those data 360 pictures that enable that?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a critical component, isn't it, of making the case back to Treasury, that hard data. The Northern Irish model of baselining every farming acre, is that maybe where we should be starting? Or if we're investing in data, what's the first place?
Well, I would think initially there was the... so we did SFI 22 and we did one of the soil actions. So we've had to do a soil assessment pit and do organic matter tests and stuff. And then, so we have to keep that data, but there was no DEFRA APA. They haven't asked for that data. So it seems a huge missed opportunity for all the tens of thousands of soil samples that there's been, and none of it's been collated. And that would have given us, as an industry, a real good baseline. So if we're going to look at, trying to raise organic matter, soil organic matter, then, surely collect the data and have some way of farmers getting that into a system relatively easily, because I think that would have been a real good start.
So I was going to say, I don't think you necessarily need to baseline every acre, at least the government doesn't. I encourage farmers to invest in understanding and getting the data that they need to sell what they're doing on their farm. But what we do need is a proper funded monitoring and evaluation programme. And we've seen DEFRA sort of thinking about it, talking about it, doing some modelling, but we're not seeing it enough. And that doesn't necessarily involve you studying every farm, but having a really robust sample and investing in it. One of the reasons that we have such a good understanding now of what schemes need to look like is because Natural England was actually quite good. Somebody's saying something good about Natural England. Sorry, I said something. They managed to get access money from the European Union to invest in this thing called MESME. And it's such a rich source of information, but we need that to continue. Otherwise, we won't be able to. We won't be able to demonstrate what's being paid for. We won't be able to know whether it's working, and that again is really key to making that case to Treasury.
Where's the mic gone now? Right here. I've got a couple of hands in the middle. Why don't you pass it along, and then we'll keep passing it along, if that makes sense, to the second hand there. Once that first question has been dealt with, please.
From the Food Farming Countryside Commission and also from Hertfordshire. I'm interested in continuing with this idea of joining up effort and joining up information. I wondered, all of the manifestos have referred to a land use framework in one way or another, in one scale or another. And the current government has had one under works for some time now that's not been released. And I wondered whether any of the panelists had particularly strong views about the usefulness of a land use framework for us to strategically think about how each area of land is used in the country.
I think Labour have pledged to carry the work on.
Yeah, it is in their plan. And I think possibly it's one of the most important things that we're going to get right, that we've got to get right. We're not making it anymore. We need to look after the land and use it in ways which really nurture ourselves, our health, and the planetary health, and tackle climate change. And we can't do that by just leaving it to the market, leaving it to the current state of play, who gets to decide who's got the loudest voice, who's got the most money. A land use framework is only as good as how it's applied. But I absolutely think we need one. A few years ago, when I was working at Sustain, I wrote a report called Green and Pressured Land. My God, the pressures, this was 4 years ago, I think, just thinking about all the different needs. And one of the big crunch points is obviously energy and energy crops and solar panels, although they're going to take up a tiny amount of land. But we've got to think about what we use the different types of land for. But one of the problems with it is that the government says we can't tell farmers or landowners what to do with their land. We've got to work with them to get the right outcomes for the country as a whole. Ultimately, with climate change coming ahead, we're going to have to get a lot more of our food from this land. We've got to do it in ways which are sustainable, are regenerative, and we've got to stop using it for stupid things and junk food and energy crops.
Sensing some strong feelings about energy crops on the end of the row there, Martin.
Yeah, from my understanding, there's been 11 different iterations of what they were trying to design. When they talk across governments, they suddenly realise all their commitments, they actually might not have enough land to get all the commitments delivered. Yeah. So it's going to have to be a high-level thing to start the conversation. It goes back down to the local nature recovery strategies for each council, what needs doing and where. Because locally, we're going to have to make decisions, because some of them are going to be pretty tough. And it's going to affect some of us in different ways, depending on where you are in the country. But it's got to come out, and we've got to start that conversation, and we've got to start to act around the balance of what we produce. We're currently allowing stuff to be land use for outcomes without a strategic plan. And they might suddenly find out all of the grade 1 land in Kent that's not going to get flooded in a few years' time if we keep warming the planet, they're built on. So actually, that's our vegetable production land. And where's the water storage? We really need to get that conversation started. And I'd urge, whatever the future government is, within the first 6 months, get something out and start the conversation.
We're getting off track, I guess, a little bit, but Labour have certainly had a lot more to say on planning than they have on ELMs itself, but that's going to really reach into food policy in particular, isn't it? We had a second question. Where's the mic ended up?
Yeah,
yes, please.
Chris Short, CCRI, University of Gloucestershire. Given we've got 2 farmers and 2 NGOs on the panel, I'd just like your reflections on what's the ideal length of scheme under ELM. And are there any innovations that you'd like to see that you haven't seen yet? Things like results-based payments or facilitation?
What's the ideal length scheme? James?
Yeah, so we've been on schemes, like I said, for well over 30 years, and ideal length for us is probably 10 years, but with a 5-year, not flexibility to come out, but just to reassess the options that are within that as well. Because often the aim is at the start. By the time you get part way through, you could have done something a whole lot better, but you're kind of tied into for 10 years. But I think we need the 10 years to give us that continuity. And it's only really, like Martin says, some things take 3 or 4 years before you see any benefits at all or any sort of habitat change. So we're really looking at 5 years and above for us. And your other question, which was facilitation, I would really love to see, like I say, farmers learning from farmers. And I'd like to see it much easier as well for small cluster groups to be able to form and be funded and to be able to spend money sensibly as well and not have to account for every ham sandwich. It should be simple. It should be a fund that they can use simply, really. And just farmers working collaboratively is always going to provide far better results. This comes down to tenants versus landowners a bit, doesn't it, Martin?
Yeah, I was just going to say, as I'm a tenant and an owner occupied and a contractor, we need shorter agreements where we have tenancies, or I need my landlord to come on board about the outcomes they want from their landscape, the responsibility for the landlord about building soil health and biodiversity into their natural capital asset they're renting me or charging me for. And it's about the balance. Some actions we can have on a 3-year. Some I think we definitely need 5 years. Some of the stuff we need at least 10 years. But that means flexibility, and it depends on who needs to sign the contract. Is it the farmer doing the action if you're a tenant? And if you're a 10-year agreement, you need your landlord on there as well. Short-termism drives bad outcomes. We need to have a long-term plan. We need to be planning 5 and 10 years ahead. As farmers, we're in a 7-year rotation. If we're only working on 3-year schemes, that's going to make my life really complicated. I need to have the flexibility of moving rotational options. So I commit to doing something, but I can move it about depending on the season and the year. So I look for longer term planning because I can plan a business on that. I can guarantee an income. What I don't want to do is a 3-year contract. At the end of the 3 years, government turn around and say, we're not going to pay for half of that now. I want to plan a business to go forward. We're running businesses. We have to have stability in what the incomes we have.
But the quid pro quo of that is, isn't it likely that your deliverables will drop if you have too much flexibility? What's your actual outcome at the end if you can move everything round all the way through it?
So you'll set key outcomes, but actually, do I want 20 hectares of cover crops or 30 hectares this year? That's the flexibility. It's not doing it. It's just so I have different sized fields. I can't do the same if I move things around. Some things are fixed. I look at my fixed assets, the corners, the unproductive areas, the buffer zones. They're going to long-term agreements. They aren't going anywhere. So that's my, it's countryside stewardship. They're my fixed assets in for habitat, and I'm getting income. And then I'll look at the SFIs, the movable, flexible, the companion crops, the herbal lays, the direct drilling, the legging fallows, and all the others. But I need flexibility in those actions that are part of an arable system that moves year to year. But I want long-term about the key habitats and the key areas that aren't going anywhere with scrubbing up corners. I'm not bringing it back into farming, but I do want to see a revenue stream from it if I'm going to take an action that delivers a public benefit.
Right. We're going to finish bang on time in 6 minutes because Vicky's going to sprint out of here to her next session. So let's have that very important final and best question, please. Yes, down the front here. Let's end here.
Hi, I'm Jo, a lander seasonal farm worker, and I want to ask the question, how do you think ELMs can help me and help other trainees and sort of that pipeline to get more succession and training up people?
Fantastic question. Let's work this way, perhaps.
That's a really good question, because we absolutely need more of you, and more of you to want to come into the industry, in all the sectors in the industry, and to be able to live in houses in those industries. So there's a whole range of things that need to happen in it. But in terms of ELMs, really good schemes that work for horticulture are needed. They're there, but I think they need more work. Because and there have been lots of tests and trials on horticulture, which they should listen to. But it's a very diverse sector with different needs. But as I mentioned earlier, training and possibly finance. To help. Not possibly. You need finance to get you on the land, access to land, and so land, training, finance, and advice. Yeah. Do you mind if I go? Sorry, just so.
Sure. Then you can only have to canter if you leave now. Yeah. Thank you very much, Vicky. Vicky heard everyone.
I was going to say, this isn't specifically about ELM. It's actually about one of my bugbears is that government sees separate policies and don't work on holistic strategies. And I'm not going to stand up for the CAP. We weren't friends. But the one good thing about the CAP was that you had to have a rural development programme. So you had to have this umbrella. So you had to think about farming holistically and food and investing in rural communities. And it enabled you to have what are the objectives you're trying to achieve? How do you look across the piece? How do you measure and monitor that? And how do you make sure you have things for new entrants, that those new entrants have the training and support, they can get into ELM, nature-friendly farming money. And then the other element would be then looking at the supply chains and how you could have those sort of shorter supply chains and better rewards for nature-friendly food in the marketplace. And I think we need that join up, and you can never look at one single policy in isolation.
So I'd say training and upskilling, but not out there on budget. Look at the other departments and look across where we get the revenue streams in. We can't hang everything on an ELM scheme because there's not enough money in it already to get the outcomes. So where do we empower people? But also look at enhanced payments where we stack people and enterprises on. We've got lots of herbal lays and cover crops coming in. We work with a shepherd who hasn't got a farm unit himself, new entrant. So he's been grazing our land. It benefits me. It's benefiting him. We've got someone doing bees. I'm looking at other bits. And where I'm taking awkward bits of field out, why have they got to go into a birdseed mix, a flower margin? Why can't that be an additional recognition and rewards to a new entrant starting a veg business, an opportunity? How do we see bonus payments for bringing people back into the landscape? And particularly on sort of businesses, we can stack people and businesses and opportunities. Gives us far more resilient. I've got other people, mental health benefits, all of that, society benefits. So for me, it's the additionality of adding people and businesses into your landscape.
For me, the big ask for me will be rural skills, so hedge laying, dry stone walling. So where we're from, it's all hedges or it's dry stone walls. We have a lot of hedges, obviously, on the farm. A bit of hedge nerd. But so the government is committed to planting 45,000 metres of new hedge. We're not going to have the hedge layers to be able to lay those in 10, 15 years' time. Decent apprenticeship scheme is to get people back onto doing that, and that's just getting people back onto the land again. And then once you get a hedge layer who's going to do the stuff through the winter, he then might do the dry stone walling through the summer. He might do some shearing through the summer. He might do some plant service through the summer. So just getting people back out there doing that and bringing that diversity back onto the farms. Long gone, hopefully, is the day when we used to flail every hedge on all our farms. We can now get people back out doing that like they were 60 years ago.
Do those responses resonate with you, or is there anything in particular you would like from ELMs?
Is this working? Yep. For me, I have no stability. I'm in a precarious employment agreement. It's seasonal, so I'm only employed from April through to end of September, and then have to find some random job for the winter to see me through.
Do some hedging.
Yeah, fair enough.
Shearing tour of Australia as well, maybe that'd be good.
So yeah, I just want stability and finance, really.
But isn't that all young people and people? We've got to make farming and farming rural life have stability in payments and opportunities. We've seen lots of land go out for land being sold or for tenancies, but they keep hold of the house and the farmyard and everything. So where's the new opportunity for new businesses to come in? So you've got to be able to have planning that works to build a farmyard and a barn and a house. We've got to join it up, and it's got to be bigger than what the ELM is. But we really need that rural prosperity view around how do we put people back into our landscape and have true, honest jobs that pay a fair wage and give stability to people.
A very fine ending, and we shouldn't understate the amount of churn that is happening at the moment for a multitude of reasons. There's a lot of land sales going on. Farmers Weekly tracks the number of acres sold on the open market, certainly those that are advertised through our pages, and at the moment it's more than a fifth up on last year. Now that's also because people are paying down debt and various things, but some folk out there are really struggling to adapt to these new realities, so the challenges are enormous. With that being said, if I was just to briefly summarise some of the essence of what our panel has said, I do think that DEFRA does deserve some credit because they don't half get some stick, and we are in a better place certainly than where we were. But the wish list that I've jotted down here are some, or at least many of these options need to be longer term. There needs to be more joined up thinking, the better data, that contentious issue of increasing the budget possibly, and more training, and apparently we need more land as well, so there's a good challenge for you as we leave here today. But my thanks to all our panelists, to Vicki Heard from the Wildlife Trust has already gone, to Alice, to Martin, and to James. Please show your appreciation.